A bombshell forecast from a major Western think tank is making global capital markets hold their breath. It states in cold and precise language that by 2028, China will comprehensively surpass the United States. This isn't a slogan. This isn't political theater. It's a hard data projection from one of the most respected economic research bodies in the Western world. But here is the twist that almost nobody is talking about. The real intended audience of this forecast may not be China at all. It may be Washington itself. When most people see the number 2028, their first instinct is to treat it as a countdown clock. The reality is far more layered. Western think tanks repeatedly raise the prospect of China overtaking America, and on the surface it looks like simple arithmetic. But beneath that surface, it functions as strategic signaling. The deeper message being broadcast to American policymakers, American corporations, and American voters is this: if capital, talent, advanced technology, and the alliance system are not aggressively realigned, the United States risks losing its global primacy within a single decade. This is not applause for Beijing. This is a heavy warning bell ringing inside Washington. To truly grasp the moment we are living in, we have to travel back to the 4th of October, 1957. On that day, Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite into Earth's orbit. Overnight, America's confidence in its own technological supremacy was punctured by a small metal sphere beeping across the night sky. This became known as the Sputnik shock, and it triggered a national mobilization that would eventually put a man on the moon. But pay close attention to one crucial difference. Back then, the United States could still close the gap through educational reform, space program investment, and military-industrial mobilization. Today, the United States faces a competitor that possesses something the Soviet Union never had: a complete end-to-end industrial supply chain. And that single fact means money alone cannot replay the comeback script of the 20th century. What America truly feared in 1957 was the intercontinental missile capability hiding behind that satellite. What America truly fears today is the systemic industrial capability hiding behind Chinese factories. Launching a satellite happens in an instant. Building a complete supply chain takes decades of accumulated infrastructure, workforce training, and engineering iteration. Washington can sanction a specific chip equipment maker. Washington can blacklist individual companies, but Washington cannot force global ports, automobile manufacturers, battery plants, shipyards, and electronics assembly lines to suddenly bypass China overnight. This is the root of the anxiety pulsing through the corridors of American power. This is precisely why the Center for Economics and Business Research, known as CBER, recently pushed its forecast for China's nominal GDP overtaking the United States from earlier predictions all the way to 2045. On the surface, this delay seems to lower the temperature. Look closer, and it actually raises the stakes. Signals that Western analysts no longer feel comfortable explaining China's rise using the single yardstick of dollar-denominated GDP. They now have to fold industrial capacity, technological reserves, supply chain resilience, and even America's own structural decline risks into the same forecasting model. That shift alone tells you the competition has entered a far more complex, multidimensional phase than anything the post-Cold War era prepared the West to handle. Now let's look at what is actually happening on the ground. The two largest economies in the world are simultaneously negotiating a tariff reduction package on non-sensitive goods worth roughly $30 billion. At the very same moment, the United States Congress is advancing fresh legislation designed to further restrict China's access to advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Low end is negotiable. High end remains blockaded. This is the true shape of the next phase of US-China relations. It is neither a comfortable détente nor a full decoupling. It is a peculiar new equilibrium where both sides do business with one hand while squeezing each other's throats with the other. China needs to read this signal clearly. Washington's willingness to negotiate over soybeans, energy, aircraft, and ordinary consumer goods does not mean Washington is willing to accept Chinese technological ascent. The closer China moves to high-end manufacturing, artificial intelligence chips, advanced industrial equipment, and maritime engineering, the more aggressively the United States will reframe economic issues as national security issues. The so-called international rules-based order, more often than not, becomes a flexible doctrine, preaching market openness when America is ahead, and invoking national security the moment America falls behind. But China is not merely shouting slogans. The latest trade data tells a striking story. Total foreign trade measured in yuan grew 14.2% year-on-year, reaching 4.38 trillion yuan. Measured in dollars, exports hit 359.44 billion, generating a trade surplus of 84.82 billion. Despite tariff pressure, despite geopolitical tension, despite a deliberate Western effort to fragment global supply chains, Chinese exports have not collapsed. Instead, more international buyers are racing to lock in Chinese orders ahead of schedule. In a world overflowing with uncertainty, Chinese manufacturing is still functioning as the stabilizer of global commerce. Shipbuilding tells an even more direct story. In the most recent quarter, Chinese shipyards completed 15.68 million deadweight tons of vessels, growing 46% year-on-year and accounting for 57.3% of global output. New orders received reached an astonishing 84.9% of the global total. The strength of a nation's navy ultimately rests not only on its number of warships, but on its underlying capacity for steel, welding, propulsion, electronics, power systems, and dry dock infrastructure. Chinese shipyards are quietly accumulating overwhelming scale advantages that will define maritime competition for decades to come. The automotive export surge follows the same logic. In the most recent monthly data, Chinese passenger vehicle exports reached approximately 796,000 units, growing close to 85% year-on-year. New energy passenger vehicle exports alone hit roughly 420,000 units, growing more than 120%. These are not ordinary export numbers. They represent China packaging batteries, motors, electronic control systems, vehicle design, overseas distribution channels, and after-sales networks into a complete exportable ecosystem. Washington can slap punitive tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, but it cannot prevent consumers in Europe, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America from voting with their wallets. This is why the phrase comprehensively surpassing the United States cannot be measured solely by Wall Street stock quotes or by counting American military bases. The United States still commands financial hegemony, an alliance system, and undeniable advantages in specific frontier technologies. That is an honest fact. But China's advantages are translating into a different kind of ledger entirely. Who can produce, who can deliver on time, who can drive down cost, who can maintain supply during a global crisis, and who refuses to break under extreme pressure. That ledger is becoming harder and harder to ignore. The real inflection point in the coming years may not be whether China's nominal GDP crosses America's in any specific calendar year. The real inflection point will be the moment Washington realizes that no single sanctions package, no single export control, and no single alliance maneuver is sufficient to bend China's overall rising trajectory. America will keep recruiting allies, choking off equipment, shaping narratives, and amplifying risk. But the more it does so, the more it confirms a quiet transformation. China has shifted from being merely observed to being the central protagonist that global power is now mobilized to confront. That shift in status itself is the story. China, for its part, needs to stay clear-eyed. It cannot become intoxicated by a Western forecast cheering 2028, nor demoralized when those same forecasts get pushed back to 2045. A nation's true overtaking has never been about a single number in a single report. It is about making your manufacturing capacity, your technological diffusion, your market gravitational pull, and your strategic endurance under pressure simply impossible for the rest of the world to ignore. Measured by that standard, 2028 is neither the finish line nor the starting gun. It is the moment when the real balance of power between the two giants becomes too visible to deny. History never accelerates or slows down because of any single forecast. But history does keep meticulous records of who chose to advance in this moment and who slipped into anxiety. Forecast points to 2028. The data points to something deeper. And the world is watching far more carefully than most people realize.